HorsePlayerNow.com's Joe Christopher, joined by Caton Bradar. And Caton, today we're going to talk all about jockeys and how to utilize the information of who rides who in your handicapping. It is my contention that this is horse racing, not jockey racing. So I don't put as much stock maybe as some other people into who's riding my horse.
Well, it could be point counterpoint, although I do agree with you that even a Hall of Fame jockey can't make a slow horse run any faster. It does come down to the horse, but I think jockeys can be very important in terms of handicapping. I always watch for jockey switches, particular jockeys that I think will fit a certain horse, a better jockey in my opinion than a lesser jockey that I think might have cost a race. And also I'll look at the top jockeys at any given meet, because anywhere you go in the country, the top 4 or 5 riders do win the majority of the races.
Very true. Now there are elite jockeys in the sport. There's no question about it. There are jockey all-stars, so to speak. They ride the best circuits. They ride stakes races around the country. There are a small percentage of those. There are a larger percentage of really bad riders, and most of the riders fit somewhere in between. Now, those somewhere in between riders may be 12% at a circuit, but those are the guys most of the time that are paying $15 when they win. So jockey ROI is maybe more important than jockey percentage.
Well, I'm going to be a little biased on this, being a granddaughter of a Hall of Fame jockey. So I stick up for the majority of the jockeys in terms of thinking that most of them really do a pretty good job day in and day out, but they are human, and there are always going to be superstars versus your average riders. But the average rider may be riding that much harder to win on that 50-to-1 shot than, say, a jockey who's usually riding the 6-to-5 shot every race. You have to assume that the top jockeys are getting to pick and choose amongst the very best horses at any given meet. It makes sense that they win the most races. They are going to pay the shortest prices, though, and that doesn't mean that that jockey that's 10th in the standings isn't capable of winning some races, too, if he has the right horse, and usually they're going to pay better. And I love looking for long shot riders. There are certain jockeys that you just know you are always going to get a good run for your money.
Most definitely. Now, another aspect of all of this is what happens behind the scenes. Every jockey has an agent. Those agents work with those jockeys to try to get the best possible mount so they can win the most races. But when I look at a race, Caton, sometimes you see something that doesn't make sense when it comes to who's riding who. We like to call it jockey musical chairs. How much do you pay attention to that?
Well, I always think it's a good idea to get to know the jockey agents. I married one, but I don't think everybody can do that necessarily. I will say if you have opportunity to talk to a jockey agent, you can learn a lot about what goes into getting a particular mount, and it's not always as simple as riding the best horse, and that a jockey who has a choice will always end up on the horse they truly believe is the best horse. A lot of politics go into it. We've seen Javier Castellano, for example, this year riding a lot for Todd Pletcher, a lot more than in previous meets, and because of that, he's maybe more likely to ride a lesser horse for Todd than a better horse from another trainer that maybe doesn't have as many great horses in the barn. Loyalty is important in this game, and you have to assume that sometimes there's a lot more than meets the eye than just riding the best horse.
And Todd's got 1 or 2 decent 3-year-olds in his barn that Javier might want to ride during the Triple Crown Series. So there is some payoff for riding the lesser horse on occasion. That brings me to my next point. Javier Castellano has a reputation of being one of the best turf riders in the country. Jockeys have reputations. Jockeys are also good at doing certain things. Some are good gate riders. Some are good from off the pace. How much does that come into play when you're looking at a race?
Well, we saw over the years early fires. He's one of the best gate riders I've ever seen in my life, and also one of the best front-end riders. He could get more run out of a horse even that didn't want to run that last eighth of a mile than anybody I've ever seen. But it's also a self-perpetuating theory, because somebody shows that they're really good at something. Trainers with horses that they want that particular skill will seek those riders out. So it's not necessarily that Early couldn't ride on the grass or couldn't ride from off the pace. It's just that he probably got more horses requiring that aggressive style than, say, another rider like a Julien Leparoux, who's known more for being patient, for having the types of hands that takes a horse back off the pace. So I do think they have specialties, but I also think that a little bit of it is overrated. I think that probably a good jockey can ride any type of good horse.
I would agree with that. Now, how much do you pay attention to apprentice riders? You're getting a weight break, 5 pounds, 7 pounds, sometimes 10 pounds when they first start out. I'm of the belief that maybe cheaper races around 2 turns over a tiring racetrack, it becomes more of a factor than an everyday 6 furlong fast track race.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And more important to me is the fact that the apprentice rider that gets the weight break has less experience. Now, every once in a while, you're going to have an apprentice that just is the new sensation, and everybody in the world is riding them, and they're getting live horses, so they're going to win a lot of races. But to me, the weight break is a little less important than how good or bad that particular rider is. I do look, though, for apprentice jockeys on more experienced horses. I'm not a fan of light on experience from both the horse and the jockey. So with first-time starters and 2-year-olds, unless it's a very special apprentice, I tend to go more toward the more experienced journeyman rider.
We're jockeying for position, night school on this episode. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoy. For Kate and Bradar, I'm Joe Christofek. Have a great time.